host, Joe Clark. So happy to have you along. So first and foremost, we've been doing this radio show for a little over 22 years. Obviously, the digital technology for you to see the video has not been around that long, but you can watch us live anytime you would like by going to our website at yourlifeafterwork.com. Find us there. Or, of course, you can always find us on our Facebook page, the Financial Enhancement Group. And our special group for you listeners is the Tidbits page. So Financial Enhancement Group, Tidbits page. Now, I created this program years ago because I understand the reality of life. And that's that you don't wake up in the middle of the night and go, I think I should see a financial planner. What happens in our lives are we reach these experiences, these moments of where now something has changed. We call them triggers and transitions. It could be retirement that you've chosen on your own. And sadly enough, it could be retirement that you didn't choose on your own. It could be a job change, a marriage, an inheritance. Those kind of things happen. Our job is to make sure that you are prepared for those as much as you can possibly be. We help reduce financial regrets at the Financial Enhancement Group. That's what we do. We take care of people, quite simply, don't want to worry about their money. Now, that may or may not be you right now, and it may or may not be you in the future. But in the meantime, we are going to do our best to use this show to educate you about things that we think you really need to consider. We do that by looking at a program or a process that I put together when I taught at Purdue University. It's called the Family Focus Process. It starts with you, your vision, where you really are today and where you want to go. That way my team makes sure that we stay on the same path. We then look at the 5 critical elements, 5 areas that I believe have the individual ability to destroy your financial future. And yet at the same time, as long as we get those 5 right, we're going to get it right. Now, James Clear, one of my favorite authors, likes to remind us that success is never dependent upon one habit, but failure can be. And I will tell you, after 32 years as a professor at Purdue, as a certified financial planner, you miss one of these 5 things. Your life after work, or what some people call retirement planning, annual tax planning, the investment playbook, life happens, the good and bad and ugly of life, and legacy plan. You miss one of the 5 and everything else can be for naught. Let's make sure that doesn't happen. I want to remind you there are 2 tax codes in the United States, one for the informed and one for the uninformed. Stick around, join the best of this, consider this program. Angie and I will share some insights with you that we've experienced over the last years. 800-928-4001, yourlifeafterwork.com. Hey, you are watching the best of Consider This Program with Joe Clark and my co-host, Angi Kinser. Well, good morning and welcome back to Consider This Program. I'm your host, Joe Clark.
And I'm Angi Kinser.
One of the most complex things that I think people have to deal with is figuring out Social Security. And so, every now and then you see a billboard, you see a poster, you see something that just causes you to go, surely you've got to be kidding. I mean, I one of my favorite lines is you can't fix stupid. Right? I mean, and I kid you not, 3 or 4 years ago, there was a Social Security sign that said easy. It was almost like easy peasy. Your easy button that we have with that you like so much
on our homepage.
Go to socialsecurity.gov, sign up. You don't even have to think about it. Just figure out what you get. Just sign up. No big deal at all. Folks, listen. When I was growing up, they said the biggest financial decision that most people would ever make was the house payment, the mortgage that they were going to have. And if you're married filing jointly, your Social Security discussion, if you've been married for longer than 10 years and made an average income or above, your Social Security discussion is more than $500,000. Now, I know some of you live in $500,000 homes, but most of you don't, right? I'm telling you, one of the biggest decisions you're ever going to make is when you take Social Security, and it becomes very, very, very confusing for people. We have somebody on our team, Dean Huddleston. He's in my Lafayette office, been with us for way over 5 years now, and his job is, that is his baby, Social Security, Medicare, how all of that works, how it applies to you, Medicare Part B. We send him to school. We get him educated on that and on that stuff because it does get to be tricky. So the basics of Social Security are this. You can take it at age 62. For most of us anymore, Angie, we're not eligible for what's called our full retirement age, or FRA, until age 67. So Angie and I are 53, so we're stuck at age 67 as to when we get our full amount. Every month, and it is done monthly, every month that we take it early, we actually lose 6% of that benefit, so 0.5% if you want to think about it that way, for the rest of our lives. And that is including what's going on the cost of living. Every month that we wait past age 67, up to age 70, right now that's the max, we actually gain 8%. So divide it by 12 if you want to figure out what the monthly factor is. So when you take Social Security is not a silo-based decision, and you'll hear me talk about that a lot on the show if you're new to it. Silo decisions are when you try to take one thing and you try to make a decision based on that one thing that is impacted by so many other things, including health, other assets, tax liabilities, marital status. I mean, there's so much that goes into this conversation that you really, really, really need to be careful. But with that, I will go ahead and let Angie talk now.
Okay. What is the windfall elimination provision?
So there's a couple of different ways where people get confused on this. What happens is there are systems in the United States. The railroad is one of those. People who were long-term federal employees that were back years and years and years ago before they paid into Social Security. The post office used to have people that were like that, right? If you don't pay into Social Security, you don't get the Social Security benefit. Pretty simple, right?
Right.
It seems to be pretty fair. Spouse is excluded, right? So, you may have a spouse that never paid in, but if you were married longer than 10 years, they're entitled to part of your benefit. That's the way the system works. So the windfall elimination was designed so that people couldn't, quote unquote, double dip. So you couldn't work for someplace where you didn't pay into Social Security, get that pension, and then turn around and work for someplace that did pay into Social Security and also get that full pension. Now, military is one of the exempt statuses that deals with this. But that's really where it comes from. So you have a reduced benefit. We have firefighters, for instance, that work for municipalities that don't pay into Social Security, right? But they do a lot of, other than teachers, firefighters have to be the most gainfully employed people outside of firefighting of anybody I've ever met. They're constantly working. Of all of them that I know, they constantly have other jobs. And so they've paid into Social Security, but they're not able to get that full benefit and the full benefit from the firefighters' pension fund.
Okay, so, that was my next question. If there are any employers that don't have you withhold anymore, because you're kind of talking like that was
by
an old
definition,
thing.
if you are a 1099 employee, and this gets to be confusing, but don't mess this up in your mind with the windfall elimination,
Okay.
right? So when I taught at Purdue, my students would ask me, where do I go to work? What do I do? Da 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 da. And in my world, in the financial planning world, when you're starting out, there's a lot of people that want to pay you with a 1099 as opposed to a W-2, right? So on your check, which I don't think we even get anymore, you just get money deposited to your account. But
Right.
You've got a check stub somewhere. I'm sure Vicki could give it to you.
I've tried to find it.
On that check stub, there is withholding. So you're paying into Social Security, and Financial Enhancement Group is paying into your Social Security, right? So, it's 7.65%, 15.3% between the two, that's getting paid. You pay half, we pay half, right? If you're a 1099 employee, you get the whole thing. And so this is a very, very important thing to understand. When I first started in the financial world back in 1987, 2 weeks before the crash started, I got audited in 1989. Now, I paid $4,000 to work in 1988. We spent $4,000 more than I made. And I'm getting audited. I'm going, what the heck's going on? This is probably why we fight the tax code so hard in terms of what we're doing. But the reality is I owed like $2,000 or $3,000 in Social Security taxes. And back then, it might as well have been a left leg, right? It was a phenomenal sum of money, and it was because I didn't understand the tax code. So it does matter, but that's not the windfall elimination.
We have a question. Can I continue working like normal and just take Social Security as soon as possible?
You can, But if you do that, there is a reduction in terms of what you're going to earn from the time of age 62 up to whatever your full retirement age is. And so you can make a little bit of money and it's no big deal. But when you start getting into a normal full-time career or a full-time job, you're going to cross a threshold and they're going to reduce your benefit. Now, I can't tell you exactly how this works because I'm just not comfortable with it. But apparently, once you stop that job or you reach full retirement age, there's a recalculation that's done that will give you credit for the money that you lost along the way. It gets to be very, very, very confusing and challenging, and so I'm not gonna fib to you. It is very, very difficult to figure out. My point is, if you have other assets, you do not want to take Social Security unless you've got some major health issue. You do not want to take Social Security any earlier than you absolutely have to.
Now, are Social Security benefits intended to replace 100% of your income?
No, they're intended if you are younger or if you are on the lower income scale, right? So let's say the first $25,000 a year of income that you would make. So the bottom tier of income earners in the United States, it is designed to replace most of that. And it does. It's very, very, the amount of recovery of what you get if you're on the lower income side is massive, right? If you're in the median size incomes, you get back a little bit less, right? You're going to pay in more than what you're going to get back. And if you're on the upper end, it's not a very good deal for you, but it is a good deal that protects a lot of people who just didn't have some of the options and opportunities that others did.
I did look up some of the exceptions of the windfall provision where it wouldn't apply. You're a federal worker, first hired after December 31st, 1983.
Yep.
You're an employee of a nonprofit organization who was hired after 1983. Your only pension is the railroad.
Yep.
The only work you performed that didn't pay Social Security was before 1957. And you have 30 or more years of substantial earnings under Social Security.
30 is the big deal, right? So if you've put in your 30 years under Social Security, so let's say you worked on the railroad. Well, you said that was an exemption. Let's say you were a firefighter and you worked as a firefighter for 30 years and you did something else for 30 years and you put in the full 30, then you're still going to get the benefit, right? So it is. But the windfall is an issue that's out there. And here's one of the things that we teach. We call it the retirement V for victory, right? When people come in and we help them go through the distribution process, that's our love. We take care of people who don't want to worry about their money. It's our job to help you get out what you have worked so hard to put in. When we do that, we want to make sure that you're getting the full value, the full benefit for every dollar that you saved. You did the heavy lifting, Angie. You put the money in the account, not me, right? Not some broker. You said no to Disney. You said no to new cars. You said no to going out to eat at some places so that you could save and accumulate money. Our job at the Financial Enhancement Group is to effectively help you get it out without the most erosion that can possibly occur. And I have never seen anything erode people's life savings like the United States tax code. I mean, if you do not understand how it comes out, bad things happen. And Social Security is one of the nemesis. I mean, when people take it wrong, they take it too soon, or they don't understand how their other assets work into it because they're, again, making a silo decision, you can get into trouble. So the retirement V for victory is, hey, we're going to take money out of your account. I know that doesn't sound wise as a money manager. I get paid to manage money, and yes, I'm going to teach you how to spend your money. It is your money, not my money, right? You're going to take the money out, and you're going to delay Social Security. And then when Social Security kicks in, you've had that 8% guaranteed return, and you've got that V going back up. You'll be able to take out less money because of required minimum distributions, and you'll get Social Security, and you will have a better life, and it will be more tax efficient, and we will help you do it. Give Angie a call at 800-928-4001. Get signed up for your Next Steps meeting. We'll give you things you want to consider today, things you're going to want to consider in the future. And if we choose to partner together, what FEG will do for you, and we'll put it into writing. Again, you can go to our website at yourlifeafterwork.com, or call Angie at 800-928-4001. We'll take a break and be right back. Hey, you are watching the best of Consider This program with Joe Clark and my co-host, Angi Kinser. Well, good morning and welcome back to Consider This. I'm your host, Joe Clark.
And I'm Angi Kinser.
Happy to have you along. We're talking about one of the most interesting conversations of all time. You know, the last crisis we lived through, 08 and 09, it was all about housing to the downside. This one, ladies and gentlemen, unless you're in New York or California, is all about housing to the upside. It is an amazing period of time. And one of the companies that we work with that has really good analysts, in our opinion, is a company called First Trust. And, you know, we saw estimates come out, and Angie, you've got the numbers in front of you. I don't have a computer screen, but the expectation was like a 1.3 or 1.4 million homes that were started year over year, and it was like 13.9.
It was 13.9 in July. To home sales had increased that much.
Yeah.
And they also
like
talked about
hotcakes.
They also talked about the new median price was up to 330.
Yeah. So what's happening inside of housing, and let's get to the economics of why it's so important first.
Okay.
Housing and autos are two of the things that we watch because they involve what's called complementary spending. And complementary is when the spending of $1 causes you to spend another dollar, right? So this pen, for instance, this is cool technology, by the way. This pen, right, does me no good without this iPad. They don't come together. You have to buy them separately, right? So spending this got me to spend this. The water in my glass did me no good without the glass, right? Spending on water got me to spend money on the glass. What happens in housing is it does you no good without couches and microwaves and pots and pans and dishwashers and da. So spending $1 creates this mass acceleration of spending a lot of other dollars across the board. So the more you can have in housing starts, the better off you're going to be in a temporary economy. Now, what happened when we went back into the Great Recession? Right, we had, let's go back before that. Let's go back to the 2004, 2005, 2006. The prices of houses were rising so rapidly that many youngsters could not afford to buy a home. And then you had the crash, if you will, in 08 and 09, right, where the banks would not loan you the money to buy the home. And the values of the houses just fell and I mean, you all remember what it was like. At least I hope you do. I mean, it was a very, very ugly period of time, and construction companies went under, and nobody was building homes, and nobody wanted to loan money for you to buy a home. I mean, it was really a sad period of time. Well, you know, now we're 11 years later, and I know it's hard to imagine, but we are 11 years past that Great Recession. And you've got all of these millennials that are now those 30-year-old people that I was talking about that are getting married, you know, that are ready to move out and get rid of an apartment and actually begin to buy a house. And the inventory is simply not there. That is exacerbated by the loss of jobs, right? So one of the reasons people stay in communities is because they have a job, right? I mean, we can think of one of the lovely ladies at our office that, you know, if she could take her job and go to Florida, she would be in Florida. She just doesn't have a job where you can be not in the office to be able to do what it is, right? But how many people, Angie, over this last 7 months of our lives now are able to work at home?
A
right?
lot. I'm sure it's.
So the big Silicon Valley companies already right now are talking about, okay, Ange, you want to work from home the rest of your life? Okay. You want to move out of San Francisco so you don't have to pay the taxes and have the property cost? Okay. We're going to reduce your income by 20%. And you get out your handy dandy HP 12C. That's a calculator for you non-financial people that don't use financial calculators. You get out and do the math and you go, what? It is cheaper. I will save money to take a 20% pay cut, which helps the company, right? And get out of Dodge, right? To get out of this state, get out of this city, and to be able to move. So we've got this massive amount of relocation going to places like Miami, Austin, Indianapolis, Jacksonville, you know, places where the cost of living is lower. Austin, not necessarily I could say it's lower, but people love that city.
Yeah.
But you're seeing that mass exodus of people. You're seeing the millennials all of a sudden need to buy houses, and they are literally buying homes sight unseen. They're getting listed on Zillow, or they're getting listed. People aren't even watching them. They're writing checks.
The house that I listed last month sold.
She's a flipper,
Sold on the first day. I had 5 offers on the first day, and the realtor did the tours virtually, and 2 of the offers I got sight unseen. They didn't come to the home. They didn't do anything, and all of the offers were above my asking price. Something's going on.
Yes, it's an amazing world. So I will, since we're here, every now and then I get advice or get asked this question. So this came up last week. Had a dad, and both of their kids are actually moving back to Indiana. Both recently grandchildren or grandkids are involved. They're both moving back to Indiana, and they want to make a gift. We're going to test you here, Ange. You ready? They want to make a gift to the kids as part of the down payment. Now, how much can they gift?
$15,000.
$15,000 each.
Each, yes.
Right. So $30,000. Right.
Which was
and if they're married,
$60,000.
$60,000. There you go. See how this works? And if they're not married, 30, right?
Yes.
So, and that number does change, by the way, right? But here's the point. And Angie, I mean, when most of you who are listening to the show go out to buy a home, they're not going to look to see if there's any strange deposits in your bank account. But bankers don't like irregularities. I mean, creditors just start to ask questions. And so I said, you do not want to wait for them to find the house and then give them the 60 grand. You want to put the 60 grand in their checking account today, right? So if they find the house in 2 months, the money was already there and the banker's not going to start asking questions where it came from. That, and 2, they may have to be able to write a check the day they show up to get the shape to see the house, right? So you want to if you're going to make the gift, you want to pre-think this in terms of how it needs to go down.
I'm setting up this next question, but what does the high price of homes selling right now do to rent prices?
So it is a challenging thing. The more accessible homes are, the lower rent prices typically become, right? Because we have this strange belief. I'm not a big fan of this, even though I've always owned a home, I guess. I don't think everybody ought to own a home, especially if you don't think you're going to be there for 5 to 7 years. I think the carry cost and the selling and everything else doesn't typically make it worthwhile. Just my opinion, right? And yet I own a house, so take it for what it's worth. But typically when the accessibility of mortgages go up, houses go up, you will watch rent prices decline. Every now and then you actually watch them both go up at the same time. So what's happened here recently is when most people, especially younger people, buy houses, they don't buy them based on the cost. They buy them based on the payment, right? And we are at record low interest rates.
Right.
So the lower the interest rate has fallen, right, the higher the value of the cost on the house has become. At the same time, banks are still adamant about having an actual down payment, right? Yeah. Having some skin in the game, which went away in 05 and 06, right? They couldn't even spell PMI after a while, right? So now we're back to the period of time where the kids have got to put down a down payment. And unless you have a parent or who's going to gift you the money, or you've saved and accumulated your own, you have a problem where you may be able to cash flow the rent payment, but you can't necessarily put the down payment down for a house. And so what we've seen in some areas is actually a rise in both of them at the same time.
That makes this next question really interesting. If you had somewhere to stay or somewhere to rent, would it be worth selling your home for a profit and waiting on home prices to go down to buy again?
No. And here's why I would say no to that, unless you thought the asset price was going to continue to decline over an extended period of time. Right. One of the rules I always have with assets is before you sell something, you have to know what you're going to do with the capital. Right. Money is basically worthless. When I give you your paycheck, when you get it, it does nothing for you. Right. Except it pays the house payment. It pays the car payment. It buys the groceries. It takes care of Ava. It buys the dogs. Right. It's what we can trade for it. Right. So you exchange man hours or women hours right? For cash that you can exchange for something else. I think that's one of the mistakes that people make when they sell a stock. They'll look at a stock and go, well, the stock's up 25%, so I'm selling it. But you're turning around and buying another stock that very likely also went up 25%. And if it didn't, probably shouldn't have, and you probably shouldn't be buying it in the first place, right? So anytime you're moving capital from point A to point B, you've always got to ask that question. What is the transaction cost? And I don't mean commissions to a broker. I mean the taxes to the IRS. What's the transaction cost of making this trade? And secondly, what am I doing in my risk profile? What opportunity am I gaining by making this decision that is coming on? And a lot of times people don't think that. So in houses, especially because there's some emotional attachment to it, you paid $100,000 for the house and suddenly somebody says it's worth $250,000. It's really, really easy mentally to say, I believe I will sell it and take my $250,000 and go home, right? The problem is you no longer have a home, right? Now you got to figure out, okay, what am I going to do with that $250,000? And odds are the next house that you buy also appreciated very similar to the one you did. Unless it's like you, where you like to buy things. I mean, you need something fixed, call Angie. Don't call Joe, because I am not good at it. I mean, she's got hammers, tools, all sorts of good things, right?
Well, now, don't go too far. I can give you.
I can put out your number too.
No.
800-928-4001. Call and get Angie's YouTube advice on how to hang drywall, because maybe she can do it.
I can't hang it, but I can finish it.
There you go.
Yes. The last thing I guess we can touch on real quick, how does it relate to job? I mean, everything, the prices are high.
Well, where the most
jobs are,
where the most jobs are and where the most new opportunity is, prices will be higher. That's almost an always. That is almost an always adage. Where the most opportunity is, where the prices are, weather's one of those things, right? But when people can move easily, that you'll find pots and bubbles of increasing prices. Hey, give Angie a call, 800-928-4001. Get signed up for your Next Steps meeting. We look forward to meeting you. We'll take a break. 800-928-4001. Hey, you are watching the best of Consider This program with Joe Clark and my co-host, Angi Kinser. Good afternoon and welcome back to Consider This program. I'm Joe Clark, your host.
And I'm Angi Kinser.
And if you wonder why I say good morning and good afternoon, we do this live streaming every Tuesday night from 5 to 6 p.m., where feel free to watch us. You can send in questions if you want to. We have some fun between the breaks where we talk about some extracurricular activity sometimes. But for those of you that listen to it on the radio, we're more than happy to continue to have you along. Some of you are listening in the afternoon. Some of you are up bright and early listening on WIBC. And anyhow, we're very respectful of your time and happy to have you along. So, Angie.
So we have a little quiz that I'm going to give you about charitable considerations. And with each of these questions, maybe you can fill us in a little bit.
Okay.
So, question number 1. Do you research charities before making a contribution?
Do I or do most people?
Do you?
I do. And Angie actually brought this up earlier. A few years ago, Barb and I looked at our tax return, and the list of places that we gave money to was just way too long for me to even remotely consider, whether I knew anything about them or not, right? It was people who would call and say, will you sponsor a golf hole? Will you do this? Will you do that? And it was a bunch of smaller investments, if you will. And so this is probably 2015, and I sit down with my wife and my family, and we created what we call a charitable vision, just like I talked to you guys about a financial vision. So we know exactly who it is we want to give to. So other than our church, we give to pet places, right? So homeless, hungry people and dogs. And I'll leave the other line out since you told me it wasn't politically correct. But we know exactly where that is, so it lets us spend more time researching to make sure the money's going in the good places and everything else. And I encourage people, and in most charities, by the way, would rather have focused donations, right? And then having a bunch of little spatters that are all over the place. It's much more predictable, and you can get much more emotionally attached.
So, well, the next question you kind of answered, do you read reports from the charities on how the donations were actually used, or can you request those, or?
And this is one of the things to remember for you good-hearted people. You actually have more liability on a 501c3 not-for-profit board than you do on a business board. And the reason for that is in the state of Indiana or whatever state you're in, and not-for-profit doesn't pay taxes. Anybody has the right to request the data. They don't always like to give it up, right? But most of the places that you're going to give money to will create an annual report, and they'll talk about some of the things they've done. Most of the churches do that. You know, they'll show you, here's where our money's gone. And what you're really looking for is how much of it is going toward the mission and how much of it's going toward overhead, you know, especially salaries.
Okay, are you aware that many charities receive non-cash gifts, such as securities or real estate?
Say it's not so.
I know.
Yeah.
I figured you were surprised.
That's one of the things that we help people do a lot is use, well, now, a few years ago, we finally were able to use money out of IRAs if you're over 70 and a half, called QCDs, or qualified charitable distributions. So instead of having to take your RMD, you can take money directly to your charity from your IRA. Again, you have to be over 70 and a half, and it's not a 401k. It has to be an IRA. And there's a couple other rules that go with that. But we also gift appreciated stock. So again, if I bought this cup for $1 and all of a sudden it was worth $10 on my statement, if I sold it, I would have to pay a capital gain. I would have to pay taxation of $9 on this cup if I sold it. Right? Now, if I held it for longer than a year, it's considered a long-term capital gain. Let's assume that I held it for a year, though, and I gave it to Angie's church. So I didn't sell it. I gave it to Angie's church. The value was $10. Assuming I'm able to itemize, if you take the standard deduction, this doesn't help, but assuming I'm able to itemize, I get to deduct the $10,000 or the $10 from my tax return, and I didn't have to pay the capital gains on the growth. That's giving an asset, an appreciated asset, to a not-for-profit entity. So when you think about gifts, Angie, you can make gifts that are, and again, 2020 is different. You can go up to 100% of your income this year if it's a cash gift. In a typical year, you can now give away 60% of your adjusted gross income. So if you made $100,000 and you wanted to give $60,000, you could. Money coming out of your QCD, if you're giving it out of your IRA, does not count in that, by the way, and that can still be up to $100,000. If you're making a gift of property, that would be a stock or a building, right? That can be up to 30% of your adjusted gross income.
Okay, we got a question.
Okay.
So hold on a minute on the quiz. Darren asks, can you discuss the double stacking gift strategy?
The double stacking strategy is one that we developed years ago. When I look at most of the people who come into, and it's a great question, Darren, thank you. When most of the people come into our office, when we look at who itemizes, it was state and property taxes. Typically, there wasn't any mortgage interest, and then it was charitable gifting, especially with the SALT tax being introduced effective January 1 of 18, where the state and property taxes were eliminated, and the standard deduction being raised so much. We see a lot of people who are still charitably inclined, but they don't get to take advantage, if you will, of their charitable gifts. So one of the things that we do and teach people is how to make 2 gifts in 1 year by using appreciated securities or whatever. So they're able to get a bigger itemized deduction, and then the following year, they actually take the standard deduction. So they're able to get more bang for the buck, and we can usually save people, depending on their charitable gifting size, some sizable change.
We have a question from Eleanor in Tennessee. Can you give a QCD to a retirement home's benevolent fund that helps residents who are struggling financially?
The technical answer to that, Eleanor, and it's good to hear good to hear from you. The technical answer is if that benevolent fund, if they have a general fund, by definition to be a QCD, it's got to be a not-for-profit entity. You have to be over 70 and a half. It has to go directly from your IRA, not a 401k, so directly from your IRA to them. They have to be a not-for-profit entity, and it has to go to their general fund. So if you think about it, my brother and I are involved with CSI Ministries, right? That's a missions organization out of Muncie. We can gift money. If I was eligible to do a QCD, we could gift that directly to the church, to the CSI, because their main ministry is missions. On the other hand, if I wanted to give it to the mission fund at our church, that's not the general fund, and it would not qualify. So the question is it a not-for-profit, and is that their general fund? And if the answer is yes, then you most certainly can do that.
Okay. Are you aware that it's possible for you or another person to give under a lifetime arrangement?
To give under a lifetime arrangement.
Yep.
So I would assume in that case they're talking about a charitable lead trust or a charitable remainder trust, depending on where it is. But yes, there are programs that you can set up. A lead trust, you're actually giving away the income ahead of time. Let's say you have farm ground or a warehouse. You don't need the income, but you want the asset to go back to your kids or your beneficiaries. That would be a charitable lead trust where the charity actually gets the income while you're alive, but it goes back to your estate when you're gone. A remainder is exactly the opposite. You get income while you're alive. The charity gets the money at the end. So I assume that's where they were going. That's kind of a vague question.
It was a vague question, I thought. The next question is, do you think about whether your gifts should be unrestricted or restricted? And if the latter, which purpose they'll be used for?
Yeah. So think about an endowment. When you put money into an endowment, they're technically not supposed to touch the corpus or the body of it. They're just supposed to live off of the income. Well, in a low interest rate environment that we're in, that can become a very, very difficult thing to do. But you can have restricted funds that says it has to be in an endowment, or it can only be used for coffee, or it can only be used for the missions, or it can only be used for this. Those are restrictions. And the best way to just think about it is it's charitable gifts with rules attached. Unrestricted essentially means whoever is on the board or whoever the trustees are at the time are going to be able to make that selection of where that capital goes.
I love this last question. Do you teach philanthropic planning to your children as a way to teach them values?
Yes. Aaron Rayum, our director of financial planning, is actually a Kingdom advisor out of Indianapolis, where we do that. We do it in Sunday schools. We do it in some of the teaching. Angie's put together a kids program where we bring in the planning team and try to teach. But just that idea of understanding how gifting works and why it matters is a critical thing. And you really are, and it's one of the reasons why we created the charitable, I guess if you will, the vision statement or the mission statement for us. It's a whole lot easier to talk about a place that you are invested in, not just invested in, but vested in. It's a whole lot easier to talk about that place and where money is going and what's happening than it is to talk about a bunch of vague stuff, right? It just is.
Right. And I've kind of missed this, but we were doing allowing businesses to come in or use our education center to talk about the Better Giver program, but we can still do that for a company.
The Better Giver program was designed not to help you, not to convince you needed to give more money. It's just we watch an awful lot of tax inefficiency, and we watch people give as much as they can give and then leave money on the table in the tax return because they don't understand the best way to give. And so we have helped entities and organizations where we come in and we'll talk to the people who give for you, not to try to get them to give more, but to try to to help them understand more efficient ways to give. There's still a lot of organizations that don't understand how the QCDs, the Qualified Charitable Distribution, works. And I'll just put this simple, folks. If you are charitably inclined over 70 and a half, you have an IRA, right? QCD is one of the biggest no-brainers there is, especially if you're only taking the standard deduction, or if you took the standard deduction if you hadn't made the charitable gift out of existing assets. Hey, you're listening. Consider this program. Great questions. Thanks. Keep them coming. Give Angie a call at 800-928-4001. Get signed up for your Next Steps meeting. Don't forget to go to our website. Get signed up for the Market Carver. It's free. We will share with you what we believe is going on in the economy every week. And believe me, there is plenty to talk about. Again, give Angie a call, 800-928-4001. We will take a break and be right back.
Hey, you are watching the best of Consider This Program with Joe Clark and my co-host, Angi Kinser. Well, good morning and welcome back to Consider This Program. I am your host, Joe Clark.
And I'm Angi Kinser.
Happy to have you along. Hey, there is one of those things that I'm notorious for saying that some people even complain about. They tell me if you say it enough that somebody wants to punch you in the face, that you've maybe said it enough.
Okay.
But I don't think that will ever happen. Data on Google or Google, I should say, is data sensitive, meaning the more that somebody's written about it, the more you're going to see that topic. And then you've got date sensitive stuff where you want to find the most recent information. Internet right now is not really wired to do that. And I think people learn that, but there's places you go, there's sources you go. I spent part of my high school years, Angie, growing up a debate. I was in Muncie, Indiana. I spent 40 hours a week at Bracken Library, going through microfiche and news magazines. And there's magazines that were considered very, very credible. One of those, and I don't want to pick on Forbes, but one of those would be Forbes. If Forbes writes something in a business article, you would think they got it right. And they really got it wrong. It's clearly written by a journalist. And so when I contribute, whether it be the Wall Street Journal or one of Bob Powell's things, doesn't matter what it is, it's deemed unethical for me to get to review after they interviewed me what they wrote before it airs. Because then I can kind of put my own little tweak to it if I want to, right? So you're not supposed to do that. Well, the problem is then you print an article where there's a mistake. And so I'm part of the Financial Planning Association. I was on their board. And one in the forum we had, a young CFP said, I thought I understood this. Mm-hmm. And, so a few of us went in and said, well, you did understand it. Forbes didn't. Right. So you've got to be careful what you read. And it just goes to whether it's this show or whether it's another show. Listen to what we say. Try to help get things that you want to consider. But please, you need to work with an advisor, that is trained in this stuff, where you can sit down and say, okay, you're the one that told me. I didn't read it out of a newspaper article. I didn't get it off of Google, right? I didn't read it in a magazine. You told me that I needed to do this, so that there's some accountability and process that's going on. Maybe you have some unique situations. Maybe, like in this case, you just got bad information.
So the topic that he was talking about at that meeting was if you had a 401k and you wanted to roll it into a Roth IRA, did you have to have a step in between?
So what the article actually said, and I don't want to confuse anybody, so we're not going to spend a lot of time there. Roth IRAs came into existence January 1st of 1998. In the early 2000s, they finally started Roths being part of 401k plans, but very few people adopted them. There was still a large belief that tax deferral trumped what you would get from tax-free from the Roth scenario. And a lot of miscommunication. There were CPAs back then who would tell you that as long as it didn't matter if you did tax deferral or not, it would all wind up in the mix in the end. And we just totally disagree and prove that every day to people who come in. There is still a lot of value in Roth conversions for a lot of people that are out there. But if all of your money's tied up in a 401k, Angie, you don't necessarily have the ability to do an in-plan Roth conversion. Well, now, if your company plan offers a 401k, you are allowed to do a Roth in-plan conversion, and that is clearly something that you need to think about doing. Our planning team put together a checklist for you. So if you want to know more about doing an in-plan conversion, that means you're doing it with your employer. You've got to have a Roth option there, but you can get a hold of Angie at 800-928-4001. And my planning team will be happy to get you that checklist to be able to answer some of those questions. In this case, the author of the article said if you were going to do a Roth conversion, you had to take the Roth, roll it to an IRA, wait a few days, and then convert it to a Roth, and that way you wouldn't have to pay any taxes on it. Now, first of all, you can now go from a Roth 401k directly to a Roth IRA. You can actually go from a 401k that's tax deferred directly to a Roth IRA if your plan document allows it. That's considered a conversion. So then you're going to pay the taxes on it. Where the author got confused in that middle part was talking about what is a backdoor Roth IRA. And a backdoor Roth IRA allows you to, or it functions under the rules that you can contribute to an IRA that may not be deductible, right?
Because of income limits?
Because of income limits. So there's income limits. There's also limits if you have a plan at work. Like you have a 401k plan at work, Angie, so you're more limited to doing a traditional IRA that's deductible.
Right.
Everybody that has earned income, regardless of age now, is eligible to be able to contribute to a non-deductible IRA, an IRA that's not deductible, right? You then have the ability,
And this came out of the 2017 tax code where they made it very, very clear, because we've been doing these since 2007. We've been helping people do the backdoor conversions. 2010, the AGI restriction for a Roth conversion was removed. So for the last 10 years, for certain, we've been doing this and helping people. But in the meantime, you have the ability to put money in that non-deductible IRA, convert it to a Roth IRA, pay no taxes on that. Your one catch, and then I shouldn't say one, there's a bunch, and this is why you see an advisor. Don't just take this show and try to go self-medicate, as I like to say. Make sure that you've thought this part through. But if you have an IRA, an existing IRA, you can get caught in a trap that's called the pro rata rule. Now, you may have a spouse that doesn't have an IRA, and you have an IRA. It allows you to do it for the spouse, even if you can't do it for yourself, without complication of the pro rata rule. But be very careful. And again, I would recommend you work with an advisor on this. It is confusing. And obviously, it's confusing enough that the Forbes journalist had some credentials behind his name. He was just confused, and what happened?
Is a conversion allowed every year, or is it a one-time thing? Or?
Every year. You have the ability to convert money out of an IRA or out of a 401k. If the plan sponsor allows it out of your company plan, you can do a conversion every year if you want to. We're getting ready to send our tax package out, where I'm going to talk about income variability for 2020. A lot of people with the virus had virus impact in the pandemic have income variability, some higher, some lower. And there are things that you probably need to consider in your tax planning strategy that give you opportunities here. Anytime you can, you want to turn lemons into lemonade. And for a lot of people this year, that opportunity exists.
Is there ever a time when a Roth conversion is not a good idea? I mean, in what circumstance would that be?
That's a fair question. I mean, so as a standing rule, a Roth IRA is always better. A Roth is always better for a beneficiary unless they're a charity. Then it's immaterial, right?
Okay.
So if you're going to leave me money behind, I don't care what my tax rate is. If I pay any tax, it's better for me to have a Roth, right? It's not always best for the grantor, the person that's making the gift. If you have no heirs, or if your tax rate's a lot higher than the kids who are going to inherit it, for instance, or if you've got a lot of assets that aren't tax deferred, from a sale of a business or something like that, there are definite reasons where you wouldn't want to do the conversion. I will probably still have some money that is tax deferred going into retirement, because the money I put in my own 401k, I'm forced to, as the employer, to put in that's tax deferred. The majority of the rest of the money that I have in there is Roth. I've chosen to pay the taxes on it along the way to let it grow inside of the Roth.
What is the 5-year rule?
The 5-year rule on a 401k is a very, very important thing to understand. I assume that's what you're talking about in that. Actually, I don't know if that's what you're talking about. We talked about it, I think, the week before or 2 weeks before. When you retire at 55 and you have money in a 401k, if you don't have a lot of earned income and you don't go to work somewhere else, you can get out without the 10% federal penalty, where you can't do that in an IRA. Now, there's a few other 5-year rules that go along with Roth IRAs and things of that nature. So again, it could be something in there in the article wasn't totally clear or absolutely, able to read.
Okay, well, we have a question.
Okay.
Is there a maximum age restriction to convert an IRA to a Roth IRA? And that's from Cindy.
I believe, Cindy, the oldest one I've done so far is 92 years old. And the answer is no. There is no age restriction at all on the conversion, no income restriction, no age restriction. You simply have to have tax-deferred money. So we had a person who was essentially on their deathbed, did pass, but they were still alive. Their tax rate was going to be 0. And so I converted enough out of their IRA into their Roth IRA that they essentially paid only money in the first bracket, the 10% bracket, and their 2 more affluent sons inherited the money already taxed, courtesy of mama.
At what rate do you pay taxes when you're converting to a Roth?
Whatever your marginal rate is. So this is important to understand. When you get your taxes done by your CPA or by somebody else, they're going to take the average rate you pay across the board, and that's called an effective rate. So when we talk about distribution strategies and retirement, I do care about your effective rate. And distribution, remember, your 2 strategies are maintaining and measuring volatility. The second one is what is the tax dollar you pay? What's the tax rate you pay on the average dollar you pull out? So effective rate matters. When you look at your marginal rate, that's the last dollar you earn, what it's going to be taxed at. And when you do a Roth conversion, that's just like throwing income right on top of the rest of the income. And so that marginal rate really does matter. That's where we get into some of the bracket bumping strategies and things like that to make sure that we're maximizing the rate. It's also an important part of this year, again, because of income variability. If your income's down, you may have the ability to take money out at a lower rate than what you've ever been able to take out before. Right?
Now, can you convert a 401k after you've already retired?
Absolutely. You can convert your 401k into an IRA. If the 401k plan allows for it, you can do a Roth conversion in the plan. But you can certainly move the money directly to a Roth 401k, pay the taxes on it. And it's one of those things that you need to consider. But everybody's situation is unique, especially with the Secure Act passed at the end of 20 or at the end of 19, the Tax Act changing and the THCA changing in 17, and then the CARES Act, March 27th of 2020. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of confusion. So please make sure you're working with somebody who understands this. Hey, get signed up for your Next Steps meeting. That's where we sit down and spend 90 minutes with you. Our planning team will give you things you want to consider today, things you want to consider tomorrow, and if we choose to partner together, what FEG will do for you. Give Angie a call at 800-928-4001. We'll be right back. Hey, you are watching the best of Consider This program with Joe Clark and my co-host, Angi Kinser. We hope you enjoyed Consider This program this week. There's a lot of things that we want to cover. That's why we've done the show for 22 years. That's why we write the newspaper column every week and provide you the show notes. And just in case you missed a radio program, make sure you go to yourlifeafterwork.com and find out about our Next Steps program. Here's the deal. In 90 minutes, we're going to figure out and we're going to help walk you through those 5 critical elements, the things that we talk about during the show. So our process, the family focus process, starts with you and your vision, and then we take you through those 5 areas. And I want to remind you one more time, I think James Clear just put this so succinctly. Success is never dependent upon one thing, but failure can be. And what I've learned in 32 years of running a financial planning company, of being a professor at Purdue University, of becoming a certified financial planner, what I have learned is any one of these 5 areas can wreck it all. Your life after work, which some people call retirement planning, I just tend to find that most of us don't watch grass grow, right? We have something else we want to do in life. The common thing is, Joe, I don't know how I got it all done before, right? I mean, there's so many things that come into our retirement years, if you will. So your life after work, the annual tax plan, that's something that's got to be done before the end of the year. The third is the investment playbook. How do we deal with the volatility of this crazy market? Fourth is life happens. It's the good and bad and ugly of life. It's the things that may only happen to you once. That is, we take care of 1,100 families across 31 states we have to deal with on a monthly basis. So use our checklist. Let us help you with that. And the fourth, then, of course, is the legacy plan. It's how I want to leave behind what matters most to me, my values, my memories, my assets, how I want to transfer that to the next generation, make sure that my wife's taken care of, but making sure that other people are taken care of as well, including our charities and our church. We put this show together to give you those insights and the guidance, but what we're going to invite you to do is to come into our office for what we call a Next Steps meeting. One of my planning team will sit down with you, and we're going to spend 90 minutes where we're going to cover those 5 critical elements. We're going to give you things that you need to consider today, things you're going to want to consider in your future, and if we choose to partner together, things that FEG will do for you. So go to our website, yourlifeafterwork.com, or call Angie at 800-928-4001. Again, that's yourlifeafterwork.com, 800-928-4001. I look forward to meeting you. Have a great day, and I hope you enjoyed the show.